Big pro day week this week and next week also. We're going to see quite a few of the big draft prospects on the field, running, jumping, lifting, and working out on the field doing drills. We'll see the cluster of scouts at the finish line of the 40 with their stopwatches. We will see them gathered around certain drills in particular, jotting down notes, chatting up prospects. And for more on what they are actually doing there, what they're looking for, who they're talking to, we have a couple of longtime scouts with us to peel back the curtain. Welcome to the SumerSports Show. I'm Lindsay Rhodes with, as always, SumerSports Senior Data Scientist Sam Bruchhaus. And joining us today, two of our favorites on the SumerSports staff, stars of the evaluation on YouTube, which hopefully you have been watching. Jeff Robinson, 35-plus year college and pro scout for the Vikings, currently the SumerSports Senior Cornerback Evaluator, and seen on the running back episode of the evaluation with a great story about a custodian who first tipped him off about a then backup quarterback at Michigan, Tom Brady. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to see you guys again.
Also with us, 39-year NFL scout for a whole host of teams, the Texans, the Rams, the Redskins. He was the Niners director of player personnel, played offensive tackle in the league himself. He's the senior O-line evaluator for SumerSports and can currently be seen on the wide receiver episode of the evaluation, and coming up this week, the offensive line episode. Joel Patten with a great story, by the way, having been told on the wide receiver episode about banging the table for Andre Johnson back in the day. And part of it, coincidentally, Joel, had to do with what you learned at his pro day.
Sure was. Yeah. Great to be with you both. Love talking football with you.
So glad to have both of you guys with us. Jeff, can you tell me what a week like this looks like for the scouts? Walk me through a typical day in a busy week of pro days like this one.
Well, you've already mapped out the players that you're going to see throughout the country with your scouting staff. So everybody's basically dispersed all throughout the country because, as you know, everybody's trying to cram in their pro days at the same time. So you actually coordinate with other teams as far as the players that you don't have any information on to make sure that that's shared information so that you don't have to literally have your whole staff going out to all these different schools if you're just trying to fill in a 40 time or a vertical jump or something along those lines. But what the week really entails is, it could be yourself, it could be a staff of 2, 3, 4, depending on who the players are that you need to see. But you're trying to put these players in different environments besides just the things that you see at the combine to see how they react and adjust to all the different things that go on at a pro day. And it also puts the players in a different environment because now they're on their home turf, in their home environments. They got to sleep at home. Their head coach is out there. Their position coaches, their teammates are there. So you figure out, obviously the top guys that you want to see, and you almost do it just like you do in the spring, and you A, B, C, D type of players. If they're at those schools, determines how many people will go out and watch that particular player perhaps at their school. And a lot of times you're going to get guys who are injured, didn't run at the combine. So a lot of your higher ups, head coach, general managers will want to see that player, in his workout, talk to him, and really just get an overall vibe as to how that player is as a person on and off the field. Because what pro days allow you to do in a longer window of time is to actually talk and interact, not only with the players that you're there to watch, but you also get to see how they interact with other people, at their particular school. So you get a much better feel for how they are overall. And, you get a chance, if it's a quarterback per se, a lot of teams will send out, a mini modified playbook and go out to dinner with them just to see how they'll, learn quickly to the things that are being asked of them. A lot of position coaches will come out because now you get to do drills with these players that aren't scripted from the combine. So you get to see a lot of things that aren't done at the combine. The combine is great for, the sit down interviews and the x-rays and all those type of things that go along with the combine. But this really allows you a chance to dig into what that player is really all about as far as their overall being. And it allows you to see the things that your particular team likes to zero in on, the players that fit their particular system. So you'll see a lot of position coaches, they might not even watch the workout part of it, but they want to see what that player is doing when they actually get a chance to talk to them and watch how they react in certain situations. So you'll see a lot of coaches who show up and, they'll talk until after that 40 time and shuttle runner over, and then they'll start doing the things that they need to do. Um, and, guys like Joel, who are legendary around the country, they've got their eyes set on certain things that they're looking for, wherever they go. And, there's a lot of, I like to call them masters of the pro days, because these guys are old veterans that can, they'll tell you how to get things done. And because these days are long, it's a quick deal for the players because they're on campus, but the scouts, they have to travel there, they have to take notes, get everything ready, assemble as a group to figure out who's doing what, and then move on to the next school. So you get a lot of situations where you need the veteran scouts to kind of take control of the overall situation, because you'll get a lot of younger scouts who it's kind of part of their overall indoctrination to gather information at these type of environments. So you get a lot of the knowledge of the scouting game, but you also get a lot of the youth who are trying to, earn their wings and grow.
So, Joel, Jeff mentioned that, it depends on how many guys you're looking at in terms of how many scouts you're going to send or what attention you're going to give at the pro day. This is a big thing in terms of the data on the back end as well, because a lot of those guys that are at pro days have just, ran out of eligibility, may not have a good chance to actually play at the next level. So what goes into kind of asset allocation and attention allocation when you're at a pro day, given there may be, 20, 30 guys, but only 2 draftable guys, maybe 4 NFL ready guys, and maybe 5 to 7, that might even be able to play in the UFL, the XFL, or the CFL or something like that.
No, I think that's a great point, because oftentimes you'll hear personnel departments say, "Hey, I want you to find the diamond in the rough at one of these schools. Like, we want to uncover a player. We're not through looking for players or evaluating players." And it also depends upon the number of prospects you're looking at. I mean, for the last few years, you go to Ohio State, you're going to have to send enough people because there's so many players that you're looking at, and the value also. If you have a lot of high-rated guys, the CJ Stroud workout, you had teams and GMs and coaches and owner. Our owner was at the workout with the Panthers at the time. So it really is, your investment in who you want to see, the value that you want to derive from that workout. And then I think, as Jeff said, it's so important that, and how well they're run, because some of them aren't run as well as others. And that's dependent upon the same thing, whether it's the prospects, the value of the prospects, or the number of teams that are interested in going there. Some of the smaller schools, you have to catch them on a flyby almost. But Jeff mentioned something that makes sense too. I really felt like this is an opportunity, since you're not through scouting, where your scouts can go in and really dig into some more information, because during the fall, it's become harder and harder on these campuses to get information with fear of NIL transfers, coaches not wanting to say something about a player that may reach social media. So this is a fantastic opportunity where their eligibility is exhausted, and coaches are a lot more willing to talk to people that they know and can trust. And that happens at these pro days, because it's a one and done deal. Like Jeff said, you're there for a day and then you're gone. So I also thought it was a great opportunity for young scouts to learn how to network. I would always tell guys that that I was a college director or a pro personnel director. I would always tell them, "Hey, this is your opportunity. You're going to go get information, but I want you to go up and shake the hands of Nick Saban or of Ryan Day or position coaches and coordinators, and just say, 'Hey, my name's Joe Jones, and I'm, the area scout for the Carolina Panthers, and really like to, be able to visit with you when I come, or at least who I am when I come here.'" And so it gives them an opportunity, not just to get information for the spring, but to set themselves up again for the fall. And that's really where you start looking for next year's guys as well, is because you talk to these staffs about, "Hey, who are we looking at next year?"
You guys have already given us, if you could see the list of questions that I have written down to follow up about based on what you've already said in the first couple of minutes. Joel, I want to go back to the part that you said about pulling the coaches aside.
Yeah.
At this time of year, do you find that they will tell you the truth? Because they're invested, obviously, in these guys going high in the draft so that they can say, we sent this many people to the first round or this many people to the pros, but then they also have a reputation that they need to protect in terms of, like, you trusting them in the future when you
Right.
tell them that they've got a guy. How that feels like a delicate situation. How does that typically go down?
Typically it's based on trust, especially now with social media being what it is. They have to trust that they're not going to read about it the next day or the next week or during the broadcast of the draft. So it really is, it's harder and harder for younger scouts to be able to establish that quickly. But I do think that, as Jeff said, a lot of the senior guys that are going to these pro days and running them, we're able to talk to coaches and who trust us and talk to strength coaches and talk to even support personnel that you maybe didn't get a chance to visit with you when you go to a campus in the fall. So I think it's a great opportunity. I always felt that I got a lot more information again in the spring as much as I had gotten in the fall, maybe more.
Jeff, you feel like you got the goods on players at this time of year. And by the way, it feels like coming out of the combine, there's always a story about a guy or two who didn't interview well, and that becomes like a full news cycle. Like, oh, teams didn't like their interactions with this guy. It feels like a pro day might be a good opportunity to really get to the bottom of what's real about that and what's not, perhaps.
Well, I think you hit it on the head when you said what's real. Remember, there's a lot of days between the combine and the draft that people have to fill in. If you're down low in the draft and you're hoping somebody slides, then you might throw out some slanderous propaganda just to get people to bite on.
But you're joking about that, but like, do you actually, without giving examples, does that actually happen in your experience? Are you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is all about getting the person that you want. So however you can go about getting that person, then that's what you do. So, and Joel can speak to that as well, but there's a lot of slanderous propaganda per se that takes place. And whether it's, a team, an agent, who knows who's doing it, but yeah, there's a lot of things that go on between the combine and the draft that you kind of go, really? I thought I was there, but maybe I wasn't there. So yeah, you're always going to hear stories. But to go to your first point, when you go to those campuses, if you just stand around and just watch the whole environment and just watch how how the players interact and how they associate with their coaches' interactions, you find out a whole lot more about the individual, because now it's not the package of the combine itself. So now it's the individual on his turf. Maybe you took him out to dinner the night before, maybe you're taking him out to dinner the night after, or maybe you're just at that combine, at that workout. But the thing is, you get to watch them interact with their teammates, with their strength coaches. Everything's on their turf. And so they feel comfortable. And so now you get different interactions than you get when you see them walking around at the combine, with everything that's been scripted for them. So you do find out a lot more varied information, I guess I would say, than you find out when they're at the combine. And you also have to keep in mind that a lot of these guys weren't even at the combine. So you're talking about a whole new group of players that people are going around the country to see because they didn't get the combine invite. And a lot of these guys are, fairly highly rated because they rose up the charts after the invitations went out.
We can start with Joel on this one, but I'm so interested in the concept of, the guys who aren't on the list for the combine, but then jump in, or, the junior who shows up and is running routes with the quarterback and all of a sudden ends up on a draft board. How often, we can start with Joel here, but I'm interested in Jeff's thoughts as well. How often or how many pro days have you been at where a guy really grabbed your consideration? Is it often? Is it, once in a blue moon? What are your kind of thoughts on what your experience was, Joel?
I don't know that necessarily you find a lot of surprises. Like I said, you're always looking for a good-looking offensive lineman because you need 15. So even if he's a free agent, I'm going to talk to him at that pro day about being a free agent for the Panthers and kind of do it on the QT. It's so fascinating that you brought up an exact example of a story I remember. 2023, we're at the Ohio State pro day, and juniors are allowed to work out. Of course, Stroud is throwing the ball, and Jackson and Jigba Smith is the kind of guy you want to watch run routes. And I remembered after the pro day, and he did exceptionally well, but there was a junior that worked out at the same time. His name was Marvin Harrison Jr. And I remember a number of the scouts were like, "Hey, how'd you think the day went?" And I said, "Well, I thought everybody did extremely well, but had I been in Jigba Smith, I wouldn't have let Marvin work out just because he was incredible. He looked incredible." And so that gave us the foreshadowing of of what he could be. I think the quarterback situation and the talent there has kept him back, but he was easily the better receiver at that pro day. So those are things that can surprise you as well. And Jeff mentioned something too. Unfortunately, nowadays, so many kids don't work out at the combine or at their pro day. They want to stand on their projection in mock drafts or what people are telling them from some teams, and or as you guys alluded to, what people are saying about them. It's really, really good. So that's changed. It used to be they were all thrilled to want to work out for the NFL. But I think you also get to see competitiveness. You get to see guys that are, that are challenged. It's in front of NFL coaches that you've seen them on a field, Ohio State playing Michigan, let's say. There's a great environment as well. But it seems like now it's such a small environment, that Jeff mentioned, with so many people there from the program, from families, from teams, that I think you get a great opportunity to see how they compete and the mental toughness of handling whether they're doing well or not doing well, whether they ran fast or didn't run fast. Because that's the other opportunity. Whether you're at a combine or whether you just have information from the fall, it gives you that last chance to put something in the mind of a team, whether it's height, weight, speed, some analytic number that you wanted to improve upon. A lot of that happens at pro days.
I always go back to a player that we had for many years, a kid named Marcus Sherrills. So he didn't play a lot at Minnesota. I mean, Marcus is 5'8", maybe 170 pounds, dripping wet. And, nobody ever talked about him. And he's quiet. I mean, he's got a brilliant mind, but he's quiet. He doesn't say two words. So you go to his pro day and, he runs well, but nobody's still talking about him. So you look at him and you go, well, there's got to be something wrong with this guy. I mean, everybody talks about how smart he is, but they don't think he can play. But then you watch him whenever he got a chance to play, and he played well. And so you go back again, you go, well, what was wrong with this guy? Well, nothing. There was nothing wrong with him, and we really like him. We just didn't think that he could, help us win at the time. So everybody's kind of banging their head going, well, why would you not think that this guy can help you if he's fast, he's smart, he's just not the biggest guy? And so when you put all the parameters up and you go, well, he doesn't fit this box, and this box, but he plays really well. And so those are the guys that you find at these pro days, and you kind of have to dig a little harder on them to find out what they're really all about. And if you get the chance to talk to somebody like that, because if you engage with him in conversation, he doesn't know you, he might not say two words, but he's a brilliant mind and he's a really good athlete. And then 10 years later, you go, well, Marcus, you're still here. What happened? But it happens all the time.
How much of scouting is, because you bring up something interesting there, like you've got to make them comfortable fast. Like how much of your job is sort of learning how to just get the most out of people in a short period of time? It feels very social and personable, and like those types of soft skills would be pretty important. Like you've got a whole skill set that's just built around evaluation, knowing what you're seeing. But then it strikes me that you've got another skill set that's almost just as important, that is how to work with people and get people to like you and trust you and want to talk to you in a quick way.
You're talking about at the pro day.
Yeah, I mean, just in general too, because like you're talking, he just gave an example of like, you got to get him to talk to you real quick, and he might feel uncomfortable, and that makes sense if he doesn't know who you are. But you guys spend your entire career trying to get, I mentioned Jeff told a story about the janitor, the custodian at Michigan saying like, hey, keep your eye out for Tom Brady. Like you guys all have stories of people like that are kind of around the program that you can kind of bring into your circle of sources to a degree. How much do you feel like, or is that something that you had to work on as your career went on? Or do you think that it just happened and you didn't even necessarily notice that it happened, that you were really honing those soft skills in a big way?
No, I think, and staffs will even, we've had special forces people in government, people who specialized in interviews, like teams will try and teach you that when you're at these pro days, especially not only just the fall, but in the pro days, especially how to get into conversations like that and how to interpret maybe what you're getting out of them. But to use your point, it's not our job to make them comfortable. As a matter of fact, I look at it the other way, make them uncomfortable, because this is the National Football League. And we talk about this. Not everybody can play in this league. So you want to find out really quickly how this guy's going to adjust the minute you get him in your building. Because remember, it's what we tell the prospects all the time. have fun till April, but the draft is just the beginning. The next thing you know, minicamp's going to happen. You're going to be in that building. No more dinners out. No more agents sitting there off your elbow or mom and dad going, you're great and it's been phenomenal. It's been fun and how much you're going to earn. You're going into that building with 35-year-old men who played a long time and are waiting to see what your value is. Not, you got to fit in with them. They're not waiting for you to fit in. You got to fit in with them and bring your level up to their level as quickly as you possibly can. And that begins at the pro days. Cause I think you see people compete and you get a chance to find out more by interviewing them, by talking to them about confidence level, maturity level, intelligence, like you said, communication skills. If you can tell it's someone's arrogance or someone's highly intelligent, more so intelligent than you thought. I reflect back to Shedeur Sanders. What was the reason behind his drop? Was it a performance at a pro day? Was it the interview process that you heard didn't go well for some teams? So that could happen in this time of the year, whether it's a pro day or combine interview or the 30 visits in the building, where you want to get a feeling for that. And obviously some teams didn't have a great feeling for that person, maybe not the player, but the person. So that happens.
There's definitely a fine line between overconfidence and underconfidence and the way that you portray it. But what all of these guys have to figure out is once they get in the environment with the rest of the team, everybody's fighting for a job. And these guys are a lot of these guys are, 10 years older than some of these guys and have families to feed. So you have to figure out real fast that, you're not in college anymore. You're not on scholarship. And when it's over, you go home. You don't get to stick around. And so what Joel said is correct. It's really more about how they handle being uncomfortable as opposed to being comfortable, because once you get on that training camp roster, you're now uncomfortable unless if you're that number one guy. So most of the guys on that roster for training camp are uncomfortable as opposed to comfortable, which is why the competition level is so high, which is why you do want to see and interact with them at their pro days just to see why aren't you working out? Well, you want to know what the answer is. A lot of times they'll be braggadocious as to why, but a lot of times they'll go, well, it's just my agent. If it's just your agent, then you might want to go work out, but you need to hear them say that to understand where their level of comfort is with the things that they do and say.
Jeff, I want to follow up with you real quick about just the concept, and not specifically Shedeur necessarily, but just the concept of what you're talking about there. Because I think people on the outside will go, why does it matter if you like him or not? Or if because it's framed oftentimes in terms of the story, people will listen to it and go, oh, well, some guy kind of got his panties in a bunch because he didn't like what he was seeing, or he didn't like him. But does that matter if he's going to go play quarterback? Is there a way that you can explain to people the tangible ways that dynamic is being assessed in that moment that actually will matter inside a locker room or with a coach when you're trying to figure out, what the game plan is for that week?
Well, it's almost like family dynamics, because the quarterback and the head coach, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach spend so much time together that you want everybody to feel comfortable and be on the same page as you go forward, because that position is so important to the things that go on in and amongst your team. And if there's a bad vibe with that group, then that will carry over real fast and cause a lot of negativity. And so that position, when they say the face of the franchise, the CEO, it's true, because that person has to lead everybody, and so many variables off of the wins and losses and successes of your team are based upon that one person. And if the negativity comes off early for whatever reason, then that carries over. And so a lot of times, players don't get to meet other players. They just hear about these negative things. And so you want it to be all positive vibes, particularly at that position, but those guys spend so much time together, and so much of what happens throughout the course, particularly of the early week, as you're putting game plans together, you want that quarterback to be involved. And if that vibe is bad, then you might, ultimately be saying, well, let's just do this and see how he likes it, as opposed to, letting them be involved. And so, the more positive you come across, it helps everybody, just like with any, team or, company. But that particular position, you really need to feel good about that particular player, just because they carry weight in the locker room. They carry weight, in society. They carry weight everywhere, and everything relies and goes through that player.
I want to keep digging in on this concept of comfortable versus uncomfortable, because I think that's the biggest difference that y'all are highlighting between the combine and the pro day. And so I'm interested in players or stories or experiences that you've had where a guy has had a really bad combine, but a really good pro day. Have you ever experienced that? And how, Joel, let's start with you. Like, how do you factor that into the evaluation?
I think it goes back to the film. You know, when you looked at your film, because remember, these are just numbers, and they could have not slept well. They could be sick. You have different coaches putting them through different, drills and workouts. So it's just another check of the box. But I can remember Joe Horn when he was at the combine and he ran really, really slow. He was a cornerback coming out of Florida. And I remember a lot of people were like, oh, if he's only going to run 4.55, then he's going to drop like a stone. And when he got to his pro day, he ran really, really well, caught everything. Like at the combine, he dropped some balls. And then, kind of his interaction with people was a little bit jaded because he was disappointed at the combine. But then when you got around him at the pro day, it really changed the whole dynamic of the kid, his workout, and team's belief in him. And obviously he went on to get drafted. I think it was a first rounder. And then he had a great, great career after that. But yeah, it happens. It happens a lot and some teams, will laugh because Lindsay, you asked me at one point, about people have talked about arm length. They've talked about, 330 pounds versus 298, whether a guy runs 4.86 as an offensive lineman or 5.57. And I think some of these pro days also, Jeff will attest to it, you get a chance to fudge a little bit too. If I really like him, his arms are 33.5, or when I type him, what'd you guys have? Because that's the other thing, they'll run a 40. You get guys going, hey, what'd you have? Because they don't trust their own time. And I'll go, I had him at 4.48 there. I had 4.62. How's it that far off? I like him and you don't. So there's funny things that it doesn't happen a lot because obviously if he's going to run 4.6 for your team and you thought he ran 4.48, they'll find out pretty quickly he doesn't. But there's things like that you'll be able to do at a pro day and that's totally changed. When I started in 97, you did it all at the pro day. I mean, you did the Wonderlic test, everything that you needed from an analytical standpoint kind of happened at the pro day. Because a lot of times in the spring when they're doing their junior day, they don't really want you to run them, test them, didn't want them to get hurt. They had spring ball going on. So a lot of that information came in the pro days. And now with the testing, with the analytics and with all the things that are put into it, to me, it's just matching your eyes in that film with what you see at that workout, the quickness, the change of direction. I'm not always as locked in on the numbers I am. Hey man, this guy's game speed. We talked about it, Lindsay, as you remember on, Carnell Tate for running a 40. You watch that film and think that dude can run, especially top end. So is your team and your staff going to believe that, or are they just going to be stuck on these numbers? And unfortunately, I said this, a lot of teams will get nervous at the 11th hour and say, ooh, that car still reads 4.55. I don't like it.
What,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, don't forget about the schools that changed that 40 to a 39-yard tape.
Yeah. Well,
So, and there's a lot of those. So
Yeah.
a lot of schools will help you with the surfaces and those type of things, which is why a lot of guys like to run at their home school. But to what Joel is saying, the reality is that it always goes back to what you did on the field. I mean, you can go and you can watch a guy, run against another guy that is fast and go, well, he outran him and we know what he did. So, literally what happens just one day at the combine, you kind of look at that sometimes, like Joel said, they could be sick. They could have not liked the surface. It could be anything that upsets the apple cart. I mean, a lot of guys spend umpteen hours taking their physicals and they don't get, to rest or eat. So, a lot of things happen. A lot of variables occur at the combine to throw somebody off. But, it really does just come down to, what you see on the tape. Obviously, you want an actual measurement, but a guy that's fast, you always know they're fast. And other people will tell you that they're really fast, no matter what that watch says. The guys that are fast and the guys who have the good feet, because there's enough people that will tell you ultimately, watch him because he can run. So It's just like what you do when you're doing a show. You go, I heard he's going to be really fast. So you always know who those guys are. You just want to get them to where you have an actual measurement of what they can do. But the fast guys are fast, no matter what they're on.
I think you also have to be careful. We call them workout warriors, workout wonders. You get guys that show up at these pro days, especially some of the smaller schools where these kids will come from all around. Michigan does a great job of that at Grand Valley State, where they'll have kids from all over the state show up. And they had a tackle one year. He showed up, he was 6'6", 318. He ran a 4.86. He rolled through the bags and the drills, and you just thought, oh my God. And I remember, you do a lot of film and a lot of traveling and doing a lot of schools in the fall. And I had laid my eyes on this guy. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be incredible. Once my team finds, these numbers, they're going to be upset. So I put them all in, and I told my staff, I said, hey, I put all these numbers in, and I've got the coach's number, I've got the agent's number, I've got information. I'm going to start background on this kid. You're talking about, this is in March. And then I threw the film on. And the film was awful, like awful. And so I shot a message to my boss, and I said, hey, listen, I just watched these 4 games, and are we good? And he just literally texted me back the next day and said, don't worry, we're good. And so you have to guard against that as well, because these numbers will come across. And as Jeff said, teams do a really good job of sharing information. You can't get to, 950,000 schools in the spring with just your staff. So teams will invest in information sharing on certain schools so that you can cover them effectively. You still don't have someone there that's digging up information or getting a feel for the kid, but at least you've got numbers to go off of. And that's where that can be tricky, because you're looking down and say, oh man, this tackle from Northern Michigan, he's something. And you better be careful about taking somebody else's information and not verifying it for yourself.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the information sharing? Like typically what teams are like it? Are you doing that within division? Are you doing like I've never heard about this. So this is interesting.
No, it's the combines, usually the 2, Blesto and National, are the ones that arrange it and organize it. And they offer scouts that are going to go to these particular pro days that they know may not be well attended. And they offer to share that information with teams, just so that teams can, because then what you'll do is, if that information is valuable enough and you find it credible enough, you're going to send Joel Patten back out to, to that school to work out the kid individually, talk to the coaching staff, work up the whole process. But a lot of this is just to verify, hey, we thought the kid couldn't run and he didn't run very well, or we thought he was really, really fast and he ran well. But his value may have been later round. It may have been free agent. It may have been even mid-round, but you have a great feel for the player off film. You just want these numbers to match up so you can put them on your card.
I'm going to go back to something that you guys said at the beginning about the way that the pro day just happens, like the machinations behind the scenes, and how some schools run a better pro days than others. I'm going to need some names, but also that there are instances where there are veteran scouts like Joel that will step in and kind of huddle up and say, here's what we're going to do. I didn't realize that there were parts of a pro day that were being determined by the people from the teams that were coming to the pro day, outside of after something happens and they pull them aside and say, I'd like to see you do this. But just the actual format of the pro day is being decided sometimes by the scouts and not necessarily the school. How does that happen?
Well, yes, because again, this is for us. Ohio State knows who their player is. This is for the NFL. This is for whatever team it is you're scouting for. So the pro days are run I won't say entirely, but predominantly by the scouts. And the reason for that is, I don't want the O-line coach at Michigan to put his linemen through drills, because I don't know if he's going to stress them, strain them. And what you don't want to do is, at the end of it, work them out myself because they're tired. You don't want them to get injured. So what we always say is that unless there's a big problem with that, and some schools do want, a particular position coach to work their own guys out because they're good at it, or they got a number of people, or it's just the way they are. And some can be obnoxious about it. But predominantly, before the pro day begins, as you all gather, we're all in there in the morning and we're waiting, and they give us an idea of, who all's coming, and we get a list of the players that are going to participate. There's a group of scouts that typically run geographically the pro days, and all the teams know it, and they're really good at it. And we trust that they do, or they wouldn't be doing it. And they'll stand up in front of the room and say, hey, listen, I need Joel Patten to work out the offensive lineman, and I need you also to do the height because of your height. And I need Jeff to do, the weights in the broad jump. And I need, this scout's going to work out the DBs and this scout's going to work out the linebackers, and so that we can put them through the test that we want to see. And then that's when the coaches for that school be watching just like everybody else. And that's the majority of what happens at pro days. And then so the information that you get is kind of interspersed between all that. It's in that morning when you can go in and see a coach. It could be a dinner the night before where you take some people out and try and visit with them about some of their players. But it's a long one day, but unlike the fall, it's a one day and done. So you got to pack a lot into it.
Jeff, how does that work for the quarterback position, which we've all watched workouts, that are televised live on NFL Network or ESPN or whatever, and it's the quarterback with the quarterback coach that they work with in the offseason, and they've come up with a script that they want to show off at the pro day. How much are you weighting that particular script versus, okay, now you're done with that. Now we're going to get in there and ask you to do the stuff that we actually want to see?
Well, again, that position is a little bit more tricky than other positions just because it's the quarterback position. So a lot of times, they're going to show up with their quarterback coach. And particularly if it's on television and it's in front of a big group, then they're going to want to do things off of their script. Now, of course, you can request different throws to different receivers who, you never know who they have catching for them. You can request different things, but a lot of times, particularly if they know that they're going to be, drafted pretty high, then they're going to try to stick mainly to the script that they've been working off of, which is almost a similar scenario to, a kid training for the combine because they know what that script or what drills that will entail. But usually what happens with quarterbacks is particularly if it's a top quarterback, then that team will go back in and have another workout where they don't have the script. So again, they'll send out a playbook to that quarterback, and they'll meet with them and do board work, and then they'll have them throw. So a lot of times those guys will undertake 2 workouts if necessary. I mean, obviously, if you have the number 1 pick, then you don't need to go through as many workouts to pick your quarterback. But usually there will be another workout involved with those top quarterbacks. 1 with that quarterback coach, and then 2 with the workout where it's just them and probably their coaching staff, where they're actually dictating the flow of what the quarterback does.
I want to flip to the other side of the ball here, Jeff, as well, because we have a big database of reported numbers going back to 2008 that I analyzed for this show. And cornerbacks and safeties are difficult to tell when it comes to 43 cone. Like, some of those numbers don't really mean a ton, but it seems as if something like a pro day would have an immense amount of value when you're looking at a guy and how his footwork is. I know you mentioned guys with good feet. How can you get the most out of a workout, particularly you're running it for a cornerback or a safety?
Well, there's 2 things to look at. And, we talked about a couple guys when we were doing the show, as far as what their speed goes. And just so that one of those guys who is coming out of Tennessee ran a lot faster than you thought he was going to run. So I just wanted you to know that. But anyways, to go to what you get out of those workouts is you're doing drills now that are different than the scripted drills at the combine. So now you're getting position coaches who will make those guys work their hips in different ways than what you see at the combine. And that will allow you to see more of what they need to do in a varied environment, as opposed to just something that they can train for, day in and day out. Because, kids today that are still in school are watching the combine from a couple weeks ago going, well, this is what I need to start working on. So these coaches then have to come up with different drills to make them actually work, flip, turn, track the ball, all of these different things, to where now you actually get to see their hips in situations that they didn't necessarily train for. And that's what you're looking for as far as breaking down their footwork, breaking down their hips. And again, though, to go with what Joel said, all of these things should transfer to what you see them do on film. Because any environment that you're in, if the hips don't work, it usually shows up pretty fast. But then it also ties into, okay, well, can he cover the deep ball? And that goes into what we were talking about before. People know who the fast guys are. And if you have to cover a fast guy, you'll know if you can run or not. It might not show up on that 40 time, but yeah, you're either going to be fast enough or not. And usually every team will know if you're not fast enough.
No, and that's the thing you need to know about scouting, especially right now. The scouts that run these pro days, that run these drills, some of them are so good they could be coaches in the league, and they're young. But they're actually you walk up to them and say, please run the drill today, because for DBs that's the best workout I see, and I want you to, because they got to be able to throw, and they also have to do it under pressure, because you have head coaches, GMs, all these scouts, everybody's watching you work out these players at that position. And so it really is impressive to see some of these guys and how they handle themselves and how well they run these drills. And those are scouts. They're not coaches. They're not trained that way. They may have played the position in college, or, it's their specialty, whether that's their evaluation specialty as DBs or wideouts or whatever. But that's a great part of the pro day circuit as well. When these three people are there and are going to work out positions, I was always excited because I knew I was going to get something out of it. Really good.
Who are some of those names? Let's hand out some flowers. Who are some
Joel
of the scouts?
I used to,
You could always learn a lot if he was there.
I work out the offensive line and a lot of people liked it because, otherwise you might not see what you're going to get, which is change of direction, which is, the flexibility, which is, popping up off the ground real quick for one drill, and also the willingness to strain. An incredible scout who used to work out the DBs was Antoine Murray, who was with Tampa Bay at the time. What DB workout for him, I told him, I said, man, if you ever leave scouting, you need to go into coaching, because it's the finest defensive back drill work that I would watch, literally. And I'm talking about some of the coaches I worked with on some teams I was on. He put them through their paces, always at tempo too, because that's the other thing. You players are only going to go as hard as you make them go. And at these pro days, that's what scouts are, that's their role, that's their job. And these coaches want to see that. So you have to get that player to go at that tempo. Otherwise, come back and do it again and do it again. And we would always tell them it reflects on your coachability. It reflects on your competitiveness. Like if my coach asks me, I need a running back who's going to set goals and achieve them, but you haven't graduated college, what am I going to tell him? Or if he says, look, I wanted the guy that worked out the hardest and finished every drill and was always first in line, and you're the guy that's last every time, and we have to ask you to run drills again. So you get a lot more out of it than just the top guys. You find out characteristics about players as well. So to go back to the point, though, it was incumbent upon those scouts to make sure, because some of them even felt like it was a way to tell conditioning. Have you just worked out till the combine and now you haven't done anything till the end of March, and you're working at a huge pro day and you're out of shape? That's going into your file as well, because the A's in the bar. I'm coming to the, Texas A&M pro day, but I'm good. I can go through the paces because I've established myself. All you have to do is, they say in sales, you can make 1,000 people happy, but if you disappoint one, he can turn those other 1,000 around. It's kind of the NFL philosophy as well. You could please 31 of them, but if you turn one around and they start talking, that could happen at a pro day.
One bad apple.
Yeah, one bad exposure. Not that it should, because we talked about that. We said it shouldn't be, but what you don't want it to be is the one that checked the ledger that was on the negative side. And you're like, oh, okay, so that coin just got flipped and we're moving on to the next guy.
Just don't give people an excuse,
Right?
Who was the let's go offensive lineman for you, Joel? Since I'm sure, what's the most impactful pro day that you can recall? Like, it's not necessarily even the best, because that might just be the best player, but the one that you're like, this actually had a massive impact on where he got drafted because he did something. Or
I would say that it was Quenton Nelson with the Colts. Quenton Nelson at his pro day. And this is a perfect example of what we talk about, guys that do and don't do things. So Quenton Nelson at the pro day did not want to run a 40. He said, I'm not running a 40. I'm just going to work out for you guys. And he was badgered by a guy who happens to be a general manager in the league right now. At the time, he was just a director of player personnel, but badgering him like, you don't want to compete. And, everybody else is going to do it here. Why aren't you? And, you loved, I think I went back and told you that Quenton Nelson had come to me and said, hey, if I come out early this year, what will I be drafted? This was the prior year. I said, probably third round. There's some athletic things you need to work on. And I think your film in a couple of the big games wasn't as great. So come back having worked on these things. And he did. And he came back and had an incredible year after he came back. But at this pro day, He literally doesn't run the 40. This one guy's still kind of mumbling and humbling. And then he goes through the drill work, goes through the position workout, the position workout. And he's taking the guys. This is the other thing we do. We hold bags for them. Usually we get their teammates too, but sometimes you're the one that has to help, improve the workout or be a part of the workout just because you don't have enough bodies. And he was grabbing people and throwing them down and driving them into the bleachers. And he turned around and screamed at this particular director of player personnel, "You want to see me run a 40 or you want me to keep doing that on Sundays for your team? I think you'd rather see this." And he walked back to the huddle. I remember I watched all the pens going, we're taking this dude. This guy is, if we didn't like him before, we love him now. But I mean, at the time, he was obviously a high-rated guy. But I'll never forget that. And I was like, I wonder how that 30 visit's going to go in the building.
So I'm assuming it was not the that person was not employed by the Colts.
Well, I don't think, that team wasn't the Colts, but I don't think he was involved in the 30 interview if I was a betting man.
Oh, man. What about you, Jeff? A memorable pro day like that?
Antoine Winfield. So I had Antoine in my group at the combine. And of course, Antoine at the combine, he's like, "Nah, I'm not going to run. I don't feel like running. I'm just going to wait." Because at that time, Ohio State guys normally just waited until they worked out at the school. I'm like, why not, Antoine? He's like, "Well, everybody thinks I'm too short. Everybody, thinks I won't be able to compete because of my length and all these things." And so, of course, Ohio State has their pro day, and there's, 15 Ohio State players like always. And who's the guy that's 5'9" and, a sawed-off missile doing everything at the top of the charts? And, it was one of those days where he finished his workout, put his sweats on, and said, "Good to see you again." Lo and behold, first-round pick. So we've been friends ever since, but I still shake my head at him every time. I was like, "You still should have worked out at the combine."
I could remember, it's like, and when the scouting community is, the more you can do for us is what we want to see. It scouts will actually get, can be obnoxious about that because the more you can do, and you should want to do that because we're the NFL. But I remember Lamar Jackson's pro day. He came up to me because I was helping to run a lot of the different drills and involved in heights and all that. He came up to me and said, "Hey, coach, they want me to catch punts after the workout." And he said, what do you think I should do? I said, "Let me ask you a question." Because at the time there was a huge division on Lamar because, teams were of the mindset, we were one of them, that said you'd have to change your whole offense versus a team that said, "Oh, no, we're going to build ours around him." And that's just fine. And that's what the Ravens did. But I looked at him and I said, "Hey, Lamar, if you to play quarterback, would you go to Canada?" And he said, "I would." I go, "Then tell him you're not going to do it. You're a quarterback and that's it. And that's all you want to do." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "If they have any problem, tell them to come speak with me because I know most of them. If not, we could figure it out." And he said, "Oh, man, that's great." He came up to me afterwards and just said, "I was so relieved." And obviously he's not caught any punts since he's been in the league. But yeah, Jeff can tell you this. There's teams that do, they'll take 6'4", 295-pound guys and drop them as outside linebackers at the combine or at a pro day.
Yes.
Well, we're sometimes our own worst enemies, but those things happen at pro days, especially, and even the combine.
There used to be a team that would travel around with a box, and I guess it was their version of analytics, but they travel around with a box. So after all the drills, then the players would still have to do all these drills to enter this data in their box. And so all these guys are, they go through all these workouts, and then there's this team with this box that you had to do it on their box so that they could enter the data on their box. And
what are you talking about, a box? Like, I need you to paint me a picture of this box.
just think of like a big briefcase with, an old school with like 2 big cassette tapes, almost like a Mission Impossible looking deal. So all these guys would always go all around the country with these boxes. And so everybody would do all their stuff. And then all these players had to go and do it for that team with this box because they had to enter the data on their box. And so you always knew if they went first, then you were going to get stuck because players wouldn't want to do anything else because of this box. And so when you want to talk about a long day, that box was always part of the process, particularly with the top schools. How would you describe that box, Joel?
That's what it was, because there were reactionary things that were in it. You know, it was color schemed. It was quick, rapid fire questions, and it was hours when they would do it.
Oh,
And a lot of it was physical as well. And what happened historically was they come in and do it the day before. And then you go, hey, Joel Patten's not working out today. Why not? I got hurt on the black box drill the day before. And teams are like, what? Are you serious? Like, this guy's a high rated player and he just got injured doing this box drill. We had a guy with the Redskins when I first started who was an optometrist. And they wanted him, he started by just doing hand-eye coordination and reaction times. But then he got into all, because he was a psychologist also. He got into all sorts of these crazy drills. They were little pop-ups that you had to wait for it to pop up and then you had to catch it as it popped up in the air. And I'm sitting there going, as a player, I'd be going, are you kidding me? Like, can we go out and catch footballs or put me through the bag drill or whatever? But I'm catching a pop-up. And the one that always got me, because he was this chubby leprechaun-looking doctor, scruffy beard, zero athleticism. And the last thing he would do is scare him. He'd scare him. He'd get in the chair and he'd lean in on him and he'd go, hey, if I was going to, and I won't do it on the screen, but then he would scream like a high pitch, and he wanted to see their reaction. And I sat there, of course, you're always there with your guys when they're going through that. And I thought, one day someone's just going to drop them. Somebody's just going to drop them. And well, then that's going to be a whole new issue. Because I know for me sitting here, I'm like, oh, here it comes. This poor kid's going to be, and you'd be amazed at the reaction. Some of them, were like that. And others would look at him like, are you serious? Like not even flinch. Yeah. Like this old guy, man, he's lost his mind. But
So,
okay, that's
do y'all?
evolution of
that's the evolution.
right news of the combine. Lindsay, the old combine to do interviews, the way they're now scheduled, Jeff will tell you, we used to have to run the kids down. They'd come out of the Cybex machine where they were doing a knee test exercise, knee testing and flexibility. And we had what were called dance cards. So you'd run up to the kid and go, hey, Marvin Harrison Jr., I'd like to talk to you. And it's like, well, I got 6 guys I've already told I'm going to talk to. So then he had to go back in queue for you and you had to go chase another kid around. That's how the combine used to work in the old days. It was a free-for-all. Absolutely.
100%.
So are there any
But fun fact off of that is, so I would always have a position coach with me, and we just sit down when they say, well, I got 6 other teams. I say, well, just give me 5 minutes right now. So we catch them right in the middle of their walking from one to the other.
Yeah.
And we'd be good.
This is an interviewing technique as well.
Exactly.
What were you gonna
Are there any tips and I don't know if you'd call them tips, but like tricks, that old school tricks like the box or scaring somebody? Are there any ones that y'all actually believe in, or are there some that are they all kind of just like hokey and you don't necessarily believe in them? Do y'all have any like special pro day combine interview trick that y'all really like to do and thought gave you a sense of a player?
No, the trick wasn't necessarily a trick for me. I really felt like I had to get good at interviewing. So I had questions that I would ask and I'd catch them off guard. Like Jeff keeps pointing out the scripted things, because they're coached by people from last year, not this year going in the combine, but the off season. And some of them go work out for old NFL players or coaches, prior to their season, just so they can get ready for all this. But so I'd always want to catch them off guard. And kind of like I told you before, if, have you set goals for yourself and you think you've achieved them? And they'd be, oh, absolutely. Well, then why haven't you graduated? Or why don't you have 2 degrees? This is your 7th year. And I didn't ask it to be obnoxious. I asked to see their response, because as we just talked about, that's what's going to happen in a room where there's 15 offensive linemen in training camp and you make a mistake on film and your coach turns to you and rips you and you have 4 sets of eyes looking at you going, yeah, man, that's not very good. How are you going to respond to that? Or you're like we talked about the quarterback position. How are you going to do walking into a huddle? Like I want to ask a kid, hey, tell me how the play's called when you leave, when you get into the huddle, when you get it from the sideline, you get in the huddle, you get to the line of scrimmage. And then I change it up on them. I'd say, all right, now the defense all of a sudden runs out, substitutions, and it's going to be a different defense. Give me your change of that. I wouldn't care what the answer was. I just wanted to hear how quickly he shifted gears and just to see his response. And then to get him to talk louder. Hey, do you ever get mad? Well, scream at me. They can't do it. What do you mean scream? I said, no, I'm talking about you're walking in the huddle and somebody just made a mistake and you got you got drilled. And I don't care if he's 35 or 25. What are you going to say to him? Well, I'd say to him that, he'll do better on the next one. Now, give me an example of when you're pissed, what you would say. And you'd be amazed at the different responses, and so that for me was what pro days is, combine especially, but pro days, when I got a chance to just interact with the guy. And then I'm going to put my credibility on the line when I recommend this player to my team. So it was more that than it was tricks or, that there was different things that you put them through. Because remember, you're standing there watching that workout as well. So you're verifying a lot of things in your mind. It has nothing to do with what his 40 was, how high the vertical was. You're evaluating the athlete that you're getting ready to talk about in these final draft meetings.
I mean, we told you guys an hour, and I'm going to try and stick to that. Could talk to you guys all day long about this. This is just gold. But a couple of other questions that I have before we let you guys go. With regards to the people who show up from various teams, I've always wondered how much of a tell that is. And it's hard to say, because if you show up with and you roll 8 deep at somebody's pro day and you've got the general manager and the head coach, and you mentioned sometimes the owner will come, but if you bring a coordinator or a position coach or somebody like that, and it's a big name, it could be for a different position. Like a head coach could be there to look at somebody that isn't the person that everyone's thinking that they're there to look at. But how much conversation goes into that? Can that ever be a misdirection play for other teams around the league? Bring me into that world of deciding that and the strategy that goes into it, what we can read into it.
To me, go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
To me, that's the chess that's being played right now. We talked about misinformation. Teams will, well, hey, we got that his knee was rough at the combine, or, our doctors have found, that he's got some arthritis, or, he wasn't quite as smart and articulate in our meeting. So that chess goes all up until the draft. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of back and forth BS, if you want to call it, that teams play with each other on who they're interested in and who they're not. But I think what's changed is, it used to be you were nervous about if we sent a bunch of people, then they knew there was somebody at that workout that we were going to be highly invested in. But I think what happens now is you do just the opposite. You'll send your staff to a pro day with a bunch of people and make it seem like, wow, we've got the 3rd pick in the draft, so who could they be looking at? But the fact that you have 30 interviews and you have private workouts, which is where a lot of this happens, and the agents have gotten really good, because it used to be I could dig out of an agent, hey, where did you go? Where did you visit? Which teams worked you out? I got to know who I'm going against. I got to know who I'm going to draft you ahead of. And they would tell you, oh, man, we were with Buffalo and they did a great job in Cincinnati, but not anymore. It's dried up, because the teams will tell it. If we find out that you've shared with people that you came to Buffalo for a private workout, and then we had our people come back out to Iowa State and work you out on their own for a complete day, it may cost you with that particular team. So it's gotten harder and harder to predict that. But it's a chess match that, they're trying to fool somebody all the way up to the minute they make the pick, actually. And literally, because you'll say, hey, we're going to make a trade. Who you guys looking at? And they'll say, oh, I'm looking at Joel Patten, for left tackle. And all of a sudden they draft a wide receiver out of Indiana. And you think, I thought we were close. I thought we had, a feeling for that. But these teams have gotten more and more, especially if they're not confident 100% in their pick, which a lot of them aren't either.
I think there's a lot of used car salespeople that are involved in this whole process, to tell you the truth, because, the things that you think are true aren't necessarily true at this time of year, and vice versa. And, a lot of guys, they plan out their schedule so that they go to the same schools. Just, if they're friends from way back, then they'll go, well, let's meet up at this pro day, or let's meet up at that pro day. So there's a lot of various reasons as to why. But I think Joel hit it on the head as to, the way things are now is, and how they've evolved from, 20 years ago, per se, where you don't necessarily have to send a lot of people to the actual pro day, because you can bring them on site to your facility, or you can go back and work them out at their facility. But it's one of those situations where if you do your homework well enough, you're going to kind of know the need that teams have going into these pro days. And so you can kind of figure out who's there for whatever reason. And two, a lot of times the position coaches will give you a tip as to what the value is of that player and how it relates to a particular team. a lot of times at this time of year, it gives the position coaches a chance to, be out and about, at these various schools for the players that they've seen on film. And it gives them a chance to, delve into these players more on a one-on-one basis, because a lot of times they're just watching them on film too. And so their only chance to interact is on their pro days, because a lot of coaches, A, they don't go to the combine anymore, or B, that player might not be at the combine, and C, even if they are, they still don't get to talk to them. So, the pro days are very beneficial to coaches as well. But the private workouts and the 30 visits, that's where a lot of the meat and potatoes takes place now.
Yep.
All right, last question. Which are the colleges that do run a good pro day, and why is it USC?
Why is it USC?
USC.
Oh, don't hurt my heart, Jeff.
I would say Northwestern if that's the case. I mean,
what are the colleges that do run consistently?
she has the LA hat on and she says, "Why is it USC?" Really?
Yeah, I was going to say UCLA's going what?
I mean, the guys in the Bayou, they take a lot of pride in the things going on down there. I won't say why, but they run a pretty good show. It looks like they got a lot of quarterbacks that are flowing through the Bayou right now for whatever reason. Looks like they just got another one or two at that Tulane school. You might know somebody from there. I don't know, but I don't know why that keeps happening. Something's going on down there, so they must run a good pro day.
That's right. We'll have to check it out.
Really though, I don't know if anybody runs a bad pro day. It's because, again, the scouts kind of take over the pro days themselves. It's more about making sure that you get the information that you need out of that environment, because you're literally there for that whole day.
Well, I feel like I got the information I needed out of you two. I mean, just absolute scouting gold coming out of your mouth. Thank you so much for your time, you two. Always appreciate when you have a little bit of time for Sam and I to talk a little ball. Joel Patten and Jeff Robinson, you guys are the absolute best. Everybody go check out their episodes of The Evaluation also, because there are more on the way. Joel is the star of this week's episode, which is about the offensive line. Looking forward to watching that.
No, thank you guys. It's always fun. You guys are so knowledgeable, and you trigger, as you've said, you trigger so many things that we haven't thought about in a while, or stories that we could tell, that it's always a blast. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you two again.